The Front Row Back Row podcast is a show where two grad school buddies discuss physical therapy entrepreneurship. I helped guide a company to an 8-figure exit, and I'm now starting my own mobile company. Brian grew his mobile practice to 4 clinics, and he's now doing $1 million in revenue. Join us as we help you grow your own business. And welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell. I'm the owner of Simplified Motion Physical Therapy in Phoenix, Arizona. With me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf, owner of Evolution PT and Fitness. We are Physio Growth, and that is presenting this Front Row Back Row podcast. And we are super pumped to have the greats, Jerry Durham, on our podcast as a guest today. So how you guys doing today?
Good, man. I'm good.
I'm all good. My Giants are pretty much eliminated. My Niners have had their season's worth of losses. My Warriors are rebuilding, and so I'm good.
That's why I was thinking San Fran.
Oh yeah, absolutely, dude. I'm still living
I feel like it's going to always see you with the San Fran, Giants.
I'm living in Bay Area, so
every Bay Area PT is just like, I want to work on Christian or McCaffrey's Achilles.
Exactly.
Hey, I'm a Bills.
Yeah, we could do a whole hour on that, and not even the rehab side of it, just the whole freaking football side of it.
Exactly.
Right. Oh man. Well, as a Bills fan, I don't usually get to say this much, but we're sitting pretty, baby.
Hey, by the way, I'll be there December 1st.
Oh, nice.
Not bad. All right.
The
I'm
Buffalo
jealous.
Niners in Buffalo. I'll be there.
That's a tough time to be in Buffalo, but you'll.
No, I want it all, dude. I want it all. I
fun.
want the whole experience. People are like, I hope it's not bad. I'm like, dude, I want it all.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, you spend time. You know, I know you got Philly roots, so you're used to it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So today we're going to talk a lot about, honestly, we just have 3 clinic owners here, varying levels of experience. Obviously the listeners know that I've had corporate experience, but I've only really been an owner for about the last year with my mobile practice. Brian, he's been doing his practice. He's built up 5 clinics, in the span of 8 years. And then Jerry, you said in our pre-show is 18 you did, and then you decided, I'm going to do something.
No.
You're what, 35?
It started on my own, partnered up. We grew to like 4 or 5 way too quick. And then we slimmed back to 3. It was a journey. I was in it for about 18 years and then got out of it. Right. Completely, just for context. And I think for this, and I'll stop there, started a in-network business. So contracted with every insurance. I will give us credit on a couple things, is we always were tracking the finances along the lines of cost to do business versus what we were being paid. So about 7 to 8 years into that journey, all of a sudden started finally, because we were able to renegotiate contracts one-on-one with little involvement, right?
Yeah.
And then about 7, 8 years in, we finally started getting those contracts that they wouldn't bump. And so we just finally started going, all right, we're going out of network. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And nobody else, I'm just going to say it out loud, nobody else was out of network. We couldn't find any help, any direction, any mentorship from within the profession. And we went outside and found, fortunately at the time I was in the Bay Area, and this was in the early 2000s. So the business, the business knowledge up there was awesome. And we found a great group called Entrepreneurs Organization, of which love to share. Yeah, I'd love to share. We were the 101 members, first member, and no other healthcare people in there. And to this day, it was a huge, I don't know if without it, we would have gotten where we were and I'd be here today. But the fact that we were in a group with no other healthcare businesses or practices for that matter was ginormous. And that's when I learned the majority of what I now do.
Well, and I think that's a common theme that we talk about here is, we're all practicing PTs, but it's business ownership. And one of the things that I always resonated with me when I was first starting is, I think it was Hermosi or somebody said, you never find out what business you're in until you're actually in it. Right. And I started saying, I'm going to treat people. I'm going to be the best PT out there. Look at my experience. And then after about a month or so, I realized I was actually in sales. right? You have churn rates and you have lifetime value of a customer. How much does it cost to acquire that customer? The clinics in my area that are doing that really well versus great PTs who aren't. And I thought it was, to hear your experience of going outside of PT to kind of get that business knowledge, right? To kind of tread new waters in your area. I think that's something, we've kind of pushed a little bit on this podcast, and to hear you did it, I mean, that's awesome. It's kind of leading.
Here, as most of my journey goes, I always have to put the little asterisk at the end. It was because we burned out every other fucking resource that we possibly could. And not only did we burn out the resources, but probably burn some bridges, because it started to get old after a while, because we made a choice to go out of network. So we literally had two choices: close down, go out of network. That was it.
Yeah.
We said, cool. I kind of still want to do this. You still want to do this? Yep. Literally, the conversation was like that. I'm not downplaying it at all. And then I remember it was another big tipping point was me going, we're going to have to talk. And I didn't know really sales. The terminology wasn't in my vernacular at the time, but I was like, we're going to have to talk to people differently when they call the clinic now. That was all I remember. And that's where that journey started. And, just going around. Okay. Hey, do you know where, because the problem was when we started asking within the profession, it wasn't just a polite, no, I can't help you. It was a, no, I can't help you. And then a rant or whatever, a discussion around why we couldn't do it. Yeah. And I was like, well, and it wasn't, I disagreed with them so much. It was just like, why would you tell me that right now after I just fucking told you? Right. So we finally, and I think we were just Googling business groups because we didn't know where to go to next, and found EO, and they were taking on new members. And
it's so crazy to think of now too, that like think about how big now out of network, cash based, all that stuff's gone. And then inside, and then that to hear that you were kind of on the forefront and people being like, again, it always just shows in business, like, again, like I don't want to say you zig when people zag, but to a degree, you almost know you're doing something right when someone's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. I don't know. Right. Like just because you're changing doesn't mean that helps other people. Right. And even though you might be doing something for the right things or right reasons. So it's awesome, man. I totally agree with you.
To your point. And so let's talk to people who are now thinking about doing this. You guys said you're helping people, right? So let's use this. I want to put this in their head right now. Someone looking back, right? So I've been in this 31, 32. Sometimes it doesn't math out, but I just make a number up. I just know I'm within a year.
30 plus.
I'm within a year, and I had a full head of hair, and you could actually see my beard. Is that beginner's mind, right? Of which I never understood it, and I still don't fully understand it. And it's hard to grasp sometimes. But if people say, no, you can't do that, right? Instead of being emotional, instead of taking it personally, and you just said this, Brian, is take a step back, take a deep breath, breathe out, and go, I wonder why they're saying that.
Yeah.
Right. That's all. And then write it down, right? Write it down and then reflect on it later and go, because let me give everybody an example, because this is probably why if everybody would have just kept going, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it, I might have convinced myself we couldn't.
Yeah.
Yet here's something I can still reflect on. It was this statement that typically followed. And this is what I could prove wrong, Brian. It was people won't pay for physical therapy. Yeah. And that what kept being said over and over. So I had that anchor to go, so I flipped it. Okay, so you think, and this is on reflection, right? And later, but you can't do it because people won't pay. And so that gave me an anchor to go and do my due diligence and go, they absolutely will. So I can do this. Right?
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, man, like when I was in corporate world, and I think we were like 98% in network, and this was, a few years ago, right? I remember having this conversation. Someone would say, I'm going to start my own cash practice, or, people will pay for this. And I was like, good luck, And then I realize now that I'm the one doing it. Honestly, it was self-preservation. It was me telling myself my own story of like, yeah, but what I'm doing is so much smarter than what he's doing. That is a stupid thing for that person to do because I'm a genius. And I think that when, the naysayers come out, they're telling themselves an internal monologue through what they tell you.
Yeah. And that's where I've gotten to, Owen, where, okay, well, and I've, me at this point, I go, okay, let's say you said that to me recently, Owen. I'd go, and instead of pushing back and going, you're wrong, I just go, okay, Owen, if that model works for you, that's fine, dude.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean my model won't work, right? So
exactly.
let's make this quick transition here. So don't come into this. I hope this is what everybody heard. Don't come in just focused on payer model. Come in on the business you want to create. And the business you want to create is three things. Who are you serving? What does their journey look like in your business? And then how are you going to build the systems to support that? That's a business. By the way, that is the foundation of every successful business on the face of the earth.
100%.
Walmart, McDonald's and my favorite place, In-N-Out Burger, have the same exact business foundation. It looks completely different above ground, but they were all built on the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's 100% true. I mean, and we've talked about this in the past, right? Like understanding what your niche is, understanding who your people are, and more importantly, understanding who you want to be working with, right? Like, because I say all the time, like if you laser down who that client is and you're going after that person, like it's just the dartboard. One thing that drives me crazy that I think sometimes when I have, other PTs that we're talking with, they're like, well, I just love treating nice people. I'm like, all right, like that's a given, but like you got to drill down more specifically. Who do you want to serve? And then again, if I'm going to go find these fish, where am I going fishing? Right? Like where are we going to do that stuff? And if you don't set up all those fundamentals you just talked about, it's not going to make any sense. And so those are the people, to your point, that just start saying, now all of a sudden they're scrambling and they're like, I got to make more money. So let's take everybody and anything. They'll go back to what they've learned in other jobs. They'll start being like, oh, we just get patients in randomly, even ones I don't necessarily like. They start getting burned out and realizing, oh shit, what did I just do? Right.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this pre-show.
Let's insert one part. Yeah, let's insert one part because I want people to understand this in because what's going to happen when you start putting all those people on the schedule is they're going to start canceling, no showing, and dropping off. And then you're just going to become this big churn machine, which I believe is one of the biggest factors in burnout. I'm actually part of a panel talking about burnouts, and I'm talking about the business's responsibility to burnout. And the business's responsibility to burnout is put together systems and processes where I'm putting the right person in front of the provider so that they're just not churning and you're walking in going, who are all these people on my schedule? And then we create that for ourselves. So that's the thing, Brian, right? The entrepreneur, I want to start my own practice. I'm like, cool. And then they go create the same model and do the same thing.
Exactly.
But they call it cash instead of in network. And I'm like,
I feel like I want to highlight what you just said there because it's so freaking true, man. Like there's so many people that are like, oh, like let me start my own business. It's going to be this new innovative thing. Panic after 3 months and then go back and do something that's like they just know. And now all you're doing is just created a much more stressful position. And what I love is the accountability you just talked about. Like I always talk about this too. Like I'm looking to put patients, if I'm hiring staff and we're talking about specific populations we're going to talk with, if I'm going to put different populations in front of that staff and they don't like it / don't perform well at it and then churn and leave. And we didn't even talk about turnover and churn on the staff side because of it, because their expectations.
Oh yeah, no, big time.
Right.
Oh, by the way, when I say that, I mean both sides.
Oh,
right?
exactly. So you just nailed it. I think like I have a cousin. My cousin does a lot of CFO stuff for physical therapists. And one of the first things he says, he goes, man, so many of our physical therapy practices are saying, I can't find physical therapists. And I'm like, that's on you, man. Like I'm a little overstaffed at the moment, right? Exactly. Like a lot of it is building something that's cool, building something that people want, having a consistent message, understanding your staff saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what we have. And then they're on board. And then again, like, you don't lose people at the same clip either. So you're able to bring people on faster. You're losing people. And again, people are going to leave your business, regardless. They move, something in their life changes, somebody has a kid, those kind of things. Like that's going to happen naturally. But again, if people are just leaving just to leave you for another clinic down the street, that's a you problem, not a them problem. Right. And so to your point, I think that's a huge piece of this.
Yeah. And I just want to throw in, Jerry, we have excellent ad reads for our mentorship group. And in our mentorship group, we actually use this perfect patient worksheet that Brian develops and he's built his clinics off of. And then he uses that for his marketing. And if you want to take your PT practice to new heights, do it with Physio Growth. Our mentorship program helps physical therapists grow their business and boost income. Join us at school.com/physiogrowth-mentorship-group. I nailed it.
I think we just killed 3 birds with one stone.
Yeah, exactly. That was well done. That
was my best one out of the last 4 episodes.
That was good. So Jerry,
you know what else is cool about what you just said, Brian? Think about this. So I put in the work to do, Owen, what Owen just demonstrated for us that Brian talked about. So I put in the work, the ideal client, the journey, and the systems. You alluded to this a little bit, but I just want to bring it forward. I can then use that in my job postings, in my interview process. And where people really miss out on the opportunity is the interview process.
Yeah.
Because I keep coming at it from the other side, because I've gotten frustrated with the owners and stuff that just keep reproducing the same fucked up will. And so I'm now going to the students going, you guys have the leverage, walk in the room, and you got to ask more purposeful questions. You got to show your value, right? All this. And part of the questions I'm telling them they should be asking the owners is I then tell, these are the questions that I'm telling my clients that you should be able to present before the question ever gets asked in an interview process. Who do we serve, right? What is your commitment to that, right? And, you know, when you start doing all this and look at the experience you want to create, and it's about completed plans of cares, not visits, I tell them all the time, man, your first question has to be, what metrics am I going to be held accountable for?
Yeah.
And let's say this out loud. If it's visits and units billed, I'd say, thank you very much. I'm not going to waste anybody's time here. I'm out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you're going to be held accountable to. And visits and units billed, if you can tell me what that means downstream for our clients, I'd be happy to stay and have this, but no one can tie it back. So again, back to what you said, if I put this work in early, by the way, when I have no employees, when I have nobody else but me, you will grow. We're talking about compressing time today. Don't make my mistakes, my friends. You compress time and you will increase, right? The dollar you make today, by the way, getting 5% in my little dinky savings account is ginormous. And that dollar I put in the savings account today is far more valuable than the dollar I put in tomorrow. If you do this work now, all those good things happen.
Well, and I think that brings up, we have one of our members in our Q&A group. She was hiring, right? About a month ago, we ran the numbers and said, okay, you know, you probably need to hire, and, you know, for what you're doing, probably a PT with a, you know, focus. And she has a very specific mission. And then we a few Q&As go on, and I'm like, so how'd the hiring go? Fully expecting it to be like, oh my God, I've had 4 ads and nothing came back and all that. She's like, oh yeah, they're like starting in a week. And I was like, you do realize you hired in 3 weeks when like major companies are taking like 4 months to fill a role
or longer.
right?
Yeah. And by the way, it was a slam dunk employee, someone who like fits the model perfectly.
And that's it. And she's like, well, you know, I'm just going to interview. And we were just like, tell them about yourself. Tell them you literally have an amazing mission in what you're doing. That's going to sell itself. There's no, you know, shortage out here. I mean, there is a shortage of PTs when you look at the numbers, but like this lady jumped ship because she really loved it for the same amount of money. I was like, so what are you paying her? You paying her a bunch? And she's like, I mean, not really, like just market rate. And I was like, see, you sold it on the fact that you have a drive and a mission, and this is how you serve your people. So it's, I mean, it's out there, man. Like clinic owners need to realize that.
People don't realize, and honestly, like this podcast alone, this comment I'm about to make could save people a lot of money, right? Just off the bat, if you're a clinic owner who's looking to expand. There's so much opportunity to use your word, Jerry. There's so much opportunity to grab employees, right? Just based off of the cultural fit. We're not a profession. We're not a profession where we can anybody. I don't care whether you're, you know, Stedman, HSS, you know, ONS, one of these big, huge physician groups that have physician-owned clinics that are competing against these private practices that are like, they can't pay PTs like $500,000. And then, by the way, if they do pay them a lot of money, it means that they're going to just make their lives miserable and couldn't give a shit about what they care about. And for us as private practice owners, the thing that we have in our back pocket is like, I know what makes this stuff tick, and here's what I can do, and here's what I do that's cool, here's what I do that's different. Again, this is where you'd be a better fit for me, and I'm also going to make your life a great one. Not necessarily saying life balance and work balance, that's important to certain employees, but I'll be able to hear you. You'll be in touch with me. I'm not some CEO of a hospital that you're never going to hear from, right? And so like by creating that relationship and doing that, like she did that and hired somebody really quickly. And it's like, we even said, I think Owen said, he goes, you have a very lucrative business model for a physical therapist, just because they're going to want, if there's a person that's going to, and sure enough, it's a person who's working in a hospital that's like, I want to do more. And you know this, Jerry, the hospital's probably like, no, we don't want to do any of that. We don't want to expand to that. So what's that person going to do? Okay, let me go find somewhere where I can.
Examples today of all that, of the opportunities within the hospitals that nobody can get anybody to listen to them about, right?
Well, we just did a podcast on this, but Jerry, I'm kind of interested to get your opinion. And Brian
I
brought
got an
this up.
opinion, I can tell you that.
You know, man,
I
no,
love it.
but using workshops as a retention for employees, right? So saying to your motivated employees, like, hey, when you come here and you want to treat lacrosse players, you want to treat pelvic floor, you want to treat whatever it is, using that as a way to kind of help them build their caseload, build their autonomy, and then honestly, like build their kind of marriage to your company, right? I thought it was just like a great, I mean, it never really hit me when I was in the corporate world, right? Because that was just not something that was done, right? And I don't know why, but it just wasn't, right? And for an owner to say, look, I'll throw a few $100 in paid advertising your way and you get to try and build your own caseload. Like, I think that would be a great opportunity for a new grad, right? Or even just a staff PT.
It's like personal branding.
I think so. Here's my take on this, and this should follow the theme of everything I say, because this was in my business too, because I periodically had employees. So here's the context, though. Remember, most of what I'm sharing with you about how we should do this is not how I did this, right? And so it's my reflection back and my journey back. So I'm not telling everybody I did this. So you need to do it.
You took all the lumps for the rest of us, man.
Yeah. So I didn't do the work on the front end to really get people to understand what they were stepping into, right? So I had people come in and they would come to me with these ideas, right? And what I realized on reflection is they were really good ideas, but I didn't really understand the value of it. And nor did I understand how to set up a proper process for this. So again, if we go back, and this is the same employee, could be in an interview too, Owen, this employee needs to know, right, this mission, this vision, how we're set up here, how we serve people. And then through the interview process, they need to understand what their accountabilities are on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis to the business. That should all come out during interviews, right? And I will tell you one thing that I really learned was, right, the longer the interview process, generally speaking, the better it is, right? The better result you'll get.
Yeah.
And people don't like to do it because I got to fill this role today. I got a client I'm working with currently who, right, needs someone now. And we've worked on an interview process and they have been really good about adhering to it, but you could hear it in their voice. They really wanted to jump, moved all these people to the end. Of course, all of them said how much and excited they were to join. And so wanted to skip steps. And eventually when it came to making the offer, they opted out. Right. So I'm like, right, nothing until, right, we get to the end of it. So if I manage this interview process properly, Owen, then someone like that will, and I talk about that during the interview, then you show up, you buy into it. And then, man, how easy is it going to be to set that up? How the likelihood of success, you in that role, you, the PT, being successful is higher. The likelihood of success for the business is higher. I mean, all these good things happen, all these great things happen, but let's move it back to your person who just hired. This stuff has to come out during an interview and before their hired process, right? And talking about, hey, by the way, here at ABC Physio, this is what we expect.
Yeah, right? I feel like too, to your point, who would agree with you? Every single practice owner that's ever hired a physical therapist that it didn't work out, right? Like every single one. And I have unfortunately, again, there's a mistake that I've made, is being like, oh, we got somebody, here it is. And again, I can't even justify.
Dude, I can tell you about the 2-year out mistake. Going, what have we been doing for 2 years?
And it's not, and I think the big one and the kind of practice, it's not usually on clinical skills. It's never like, I can't tell you of all my physical therapists, I was like, oh, this PT just really sucked at their job. That's not what it is. It's a culture crusher, right? Like that's the big one for most. And that is actually what can cause it. It's like they say, like, what's the old adage, right? That the A employees get frustrated by the B and C employees.
Oh yeah.
It's like one of those things where
when you sit there and try to coach up a D employee just over and over and make all these changes, the A's and B's are like, why are they getting all the attention? I'm out.
Yeah. And I think it's funny, and I'm going to say something that I'm curious to hear your responses when I say this. I think you can get away with that a little bit at the front desk in terms of like, hey, I'm gonna coach you up, because that's a position that is a coachable position, and as long as you find people who are coachable, even if they're not like as good as say someone you found someone seasoned. In fact, I can tell you that we have found quote unquote seasoned people with great experiences from other big practices to come in and do front desk work that aren't coachable. Give me the person who's raw to the job that is really coachable and wants to learn about all the process you talked about. Like, I think you and I approach front desk similarly in a lot of ways. Is like more of a sales position, customer service, patient satisfaction. We actually literally call them PCSs. They're like patient customer service positions, right? So it's like, when you think about that, I think we call it, patient care specialist is what we call it, versus a front desk manager, right? And so when you think about it that way, it's like the insurance stuff, we can handle that. We outsource it. We can bring it in house and whatnot. But when it comes to physical therapists, I don't give me the best physical therapist who's got the best hands, who's got the best exercise programming knowledge, who's the best diagnostician. Don't give me that person. Give me the person who's going to contribute to my culture, wants to learn, wants to grow, wants to build. That is not a thing that's teachable. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that's a place you can wiggle room it around. But when it comes to differences in private practice.
So I'm going to agree with you to a point. Is we can teach skills to anybody, including PTs, my friend.
Yeah.
So what you just said, my answer is yes for every employee from top to bottom, dude.
Cool.
And I don't care who it is. Early on in my career, check this out. The interview process always had a clinical component early on in our career. And you didn't have to do it on a patient. You did it on one of us. And early on in my career, all I cared about was the clinical stuff. And the deeper I got into the work I'm doing now, I'd literally tell them, I don't care what you do. It's how you present it and how you then sell me the plan of care. So I used to sit in on interviews for PTs at the front end, 45-minute, hour-long interviews. And I'd sit in and go, and I'd introduce myself at the beginning. I go, don't freak out. I'm going to be sitting here the whole time, and I'm just going to ask you 2 questions at the end. That's it. And the 2 questions were all I wanted to hear was, what do you do when a patient drops off your schedule? And how do you sell a plan of care? That's all I wanted to know. I didn't care. I didn't care about 90% of what I heard in that interview, because if you could, right. And what I love is, I always say my favorite questions are questions that have multiple right answers and very specific wrong answers. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting too, to hear you say that as a business owner, because I can see like, a PT kind of looking at that and be like, well, why doesn't he want to know about my manual therapy skills? And why doesn't he want to know about
I
this?
still to this day could never tell you
where
where any of my PTs went to school, dude. I had no idea.
I'm in the same boat.
I graduated from, I'm like, you have your license? Yeah, cool. Come on in.
But I think that speaks, I think that speaks to what you were talking about like, we're business owners. We're not, a fancy job, right? And having to have that as the leader of the company, like you need to make sure to serve many people in your huge geographic area. If that's what you're going for, you need to be able to answer those questions. I mean, that's probably the more operative part of that position. So I think that's thinking from like a big picture standpoint. Who can you help more, being one person with magic hands or having a successful business that can completely transform how your community and your region, your county, whatever, receives physical therapy, and just because you're a good business owner. So I love to hear that was, you just sat there on the wall like, Anyway, 2 questions.
It's so good. I had Jerry, and full transparency, like Jerry doesn't know, but like me and Owen went to college together. My wife, who's a physical therapist, we went to college together. My business partner of Revolution, we went to college together. And trust me, as somebody who from a business perspective, by the way, I still teach back at our college. I also teach I help adjunct professor a class to help teach business. Someone who's leveraged the school as much as possible. If I could talk to former me, I agree with you. I don't know any of my PTs. Like, I couldn't tell you if you drilled me. Where did he go to school? Where did the ball? I'd be like, I don't know. I don't remember. It's so funny.
People reach out. Where should I go to school? And I go the cheapest school.
Exactly. Where you can get the best network, right? Where the network.
Dude, I don't even care. This day and age, I don't care.
It's true.
Well, remember, I got to do this.
I think we're rare.
Uphill, right? Yeah. I walked uphill both ways in the snow to school, right? There was no social media. I literally went all the way and finished PT school. Now, mind you, I was right there at the advent of it, but I had a flip phone, which you didn't use because it was expensive as shit. Right? There was no internet. There was no nothing. It was just the very beginning. So yes, it was very important back then. But man, my network after Twitter, right? After Twitter came up, and the reason I kept going, this is crazy. I'm meeting people. I just got my name published on a research article about Team Alliance. So the work I talk about, building trust, the front desk team. Everybody on that paper I met on Twitter.
Wow.
So if it wasn't for Twitter, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to put my name on a research paper, right? So I just want to say lowest cost.
Yeah, it's true, because to your point, it's like that's the difference about, like, I'm reading a book by Gary Vaynerchuk right now, Crushing It, which I think is an awesome book, right? And one of the things he talks about is just like, if you're somebody who doesn't have a college degree, and again, this doesn't apply as much to physical therapists, because you can't be a therapist without a degree with this, right?
You got to have a degree, right?
Exactly, but it resonates in a lot of other ways, like the way you can create your personal brand nowadays, and you can leverage that in different ways. And like he was talking about how even if you're on Twitter and it leads you by what you're putting out there to a dream job for you where you're super, super happy, right? Like that's worth it, right? Like in terms of all those different pieces. So I think sometimes just thought of like entrepreneurship or different things where it's like, I can't wait to be my own boss. But a lot of people, I don't want to say are not cut out to be their own boss. That's not what's going to make them happy. That's not their passion, right? And then to your point about the school, it's like, how many people he talks about in these books, like how many people went to Yale Law School, they wanted to be the top attorney, and they're just miserable. They're fucking miserable what they're doing. They're making great money, they're doing all this stuff, and they're like, I can't, I don't want to do this. So I think the big thing is finding your passion and building what it is around it. And to your point, I've enjoyed a lot about the processes, as you talked about, like you enjoyed the processes of like the front desk.
Oh, you got to be a slave to the process.
Yeah, for sure.
By the way, my only non-BC boy thing in my office is a sign over here, handwritten by me, that I had on a piece of paper that I just ripped up. It says, "You control the process, not the outcome." I look at it every damn day.
That's awesome.
And
I love
we detach from that outcome. By the way, it's a huge sales. I mean, it's the only way to be good in sales.
Yeah.
You cannot.
Here's a good
cannot become attached to the outcome, and it's perfect for PT. It's we move right. So I walk in a room, I meet Brian, we connect. Right, I take the information I learned from my upstream sales team. Right, I leverage it in the room. Brian and I connect. I take him through a great evaluation. I show him how I can get him back to the gym pain-free and out of that morning pain. I show him what that journey is going to be like. Everything looks good. And then he says, yeah, that's not going to work for me. And I go, now I have an opportunity to get really emotional or go, so what I miss, right? So, hey, Brian, let's go through this again. So tell me, so based on that, what part's not going to work? Well, this and that. Well, okay, I hear you. I understand that. I have no control over that stuff. What would you like to do next? I think I'm going to have to find another place. Cool. Let me help you find another place, right?
Yeah.
How many PTs would do that in an eval room? Or say, I got someone else for you here, right? But even send them out, right? So if we can detach from that outcome, we can get really good at what we do. But when we're building the process attached to the outcome, here, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, and I'll keep it short, I promise.
You're good, man. You're good.
This is marketing people handing out sales scripts. Get ready. When you don't understand the process thoroughly, and you don't understand that desired outcome thoroughly, and you don't understand people, you give stacks and stacks, 5-page scripts to try to get to a process, because the whole way through you're trying to convince, you're trying to change minds, you're trying to handle an objection. I love it. I love the books built on handling objections. I'm like, why not just build a process that eliminates objections?
Yeah.
Right. And so the only way I can do that is become detached from the outcome. And so I have a 1-page, 6-point sales script. People are like, that's it. I'm like, well, if you embrace the process, if you understand people, if you understand that it's better to ask better questions, not talk more, and then use their answers, you'll get the outcome. I always say, if you follow the process, you will always get the outcome you should have received.
You hit on the perfect point, man. I think that too many people think you have to have a perfect script to close that cash patient. And honestly, you just got to be a really good. I mean, it's like a PT eval. You got to just do critical thinking and say, hey,
You know that it is
you
it's
know,
a PT eval, Owen, and not
yeah,
enough people look at it like that.
it's
You're right.
very like we're salespeople. We just sell exercise, which is honestly not a product most people want. So like
Right.
we're born salespeople. The problem is that we think, well, we're selling and it's money, and so I need to have a script and I need to buy four different optimization. And it's like, no, you just need to ask them. Like, all right, so you sound like you don't like what I just said. Why? What's a big issue? Oh, and then okay, but why about this? And then what about that? And then what about that? And then you get to your answer, right? And it's either going to be, okay, cool, I can still help you and thank you for understanding, and all that, and or it's going to be like, you know what, I can't help you, but I can show you someone who will. And then they're going to be like, cool, I'm not going with you, but my mom will,
Yeah.
and
Dude,
having
I got. By the way, I got right. I got a story to prove everything you just said. Of right. So the point is, yeah, it's be a slave to the process. And you know who
Yeah.
taught me that? You guys. I always love telling everybody I'm Maitland trained, manual therapy trained.
Mhm.
The person who taught me the most about selling and the best evaluation skills was Jeffrey Maitland. And everybody can talk about, right? All they do is bash, right? You're not doing this, you're not doing that. I go, he has 2 books. Both of them have the same exact first chapter. It's called The Subjective Exam. That subjective exam is the best sales chapter ever written for physical therapists because it was how to move through an evaluation. But if you take exactly that and move it upstream, you have a perfect sales process.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
I
really
joke.
interesting.
Yeah, I joke
Yeah.
all the time that a sales script can be structured like this pretty easily. Now, obviously, you can go as detailed as you want with it or not, right? It's an interview process, just like a subjective, right? Tell me what's going on. Tell me about where you're at. Tell me
Yeah.
what your problem is, right?
Yeah.
Like find out all the problems. Tell me what you've tried. Tell me what's worked and what hasn't worked, right? That's the first part. Then it's tied back to, hey, I can help you with that. Here's a person just like you who have used it, aka testimonial. And then what objections do you see? What are problems that you have that you could see with working with someone like me that could cause that problem? Right? Let's bang those objections out now and talk about them so that way they don't rear their head. To your point, what did I miss? Right? That's the what did I miss? Like let me get to that now. And then boom, let's go into the product and close. Right. And like it's that simple in that way. And
It
again,
is.
I
It
think
is
you could
closer
do
to a
that.
PT. Yeah, and that's the
Yeah.
scary part is PTs don't realize how close they've been to an actual really solid sales process,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? And they've been doing it and using it day in and day out, and they've been using it hopefully well, right? Let's just say
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, so I love this because I want to share this so your listeners understand where this all comes from and how true it is. So when I always credit Bishop and Belosky and Clelander heavily because when I still have the original articles from JOSPT when the expectations research started coming out. I really embraced it as a clinician and trained all my team how to use it in the eval room and leverage expectations for good. Because here's a little side note, I basically found out that every single drop off is an expectations issue. That's for another day. So
Yeah.
I want to prevent drop-offs, manage insight. So I had all this expectations research that I was diving into for clinical. I also had a bunch of therapeutic alliance, building trust, that if we get these people to trust us and connect with us, they're more than likely to complete a plan of care. So I'm doing all this with the clinical team. And then some point along my journey when I figured out we needed to talk to people differently up front after we went out and network, literally, it was just like it took me a while, my friends. It didn't happen overnight, but the light bulb went off and went, wait a minute, expect trust. I'm like, why don't I just take this same construct and give it right with some tweaking because we don't need to do a full exam. Owen, back to what you're saying, both you guys. So I tweaked a evaluation based on managing and setting expectations and building trust and gave it to the front desk team.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where I am today. And my one piece flow sheet for how to manage a new patient phone call is 90% of what you just said. And let me just say it real quick, Brian. It's acknowledge, it's define the problem, it's get their expectations, meaning what have they done in the past, what have they haven't. Sell the expert, make sure they know what they're getting for their time, money, and energy. How do you want to pay? and then recap the value equation. And that's it, dude. That's
Love
it.
it.
That's my script.
So
And
true.
I think going back to what you're talking about with hiring and interview process for clinic owners who are at that step, I think what we all kind of agree on is that you need somebody who can kind of think on their feet, right? Like that
Yeah.
they'll get an answer to one question and then be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Ooh,
That's
that
really
means
good on. Yeah.
I have to
Mhm.
answer this question and all that." So if you could structure your interviews, I mean, it's kind of hard. You don't want to go too like, cognitive theory on somebody in an interview, but you can kind of tell after you've talked with them, like you said, in a long process, maybe put them through a few different things to say like, "Ooh, this person can think on their feet," right? I always loved it when I was hiring for front office. I would always want retail or food service, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
those people get yelled
Immediately to the top of the pile. I didn't care
at.
what
Yeah,
else was in there, dude.
those are the
Immediately
two
to the
things.
top of the pile.
Yeah, like corporate would send me this, and I'd be like, "Yes, I want that one. No, I don't want that." And they're like, well, "How
Yeah.
do you know?" And I said,
Yeah.
"Well,
Based on, yeah,
one
100%.
got yelled at for how well the steak was done, which they had no control over, and they still had to say, 'I'm so sorry. How can I help you?'" And
Interesting.
retail, same thing. So that was always my hiring process for front office, and more success than failure.
I
So
think
you
too.
were
I think
talking,
too.
hey,
Go ahead.
go, Brian,
Good.
go, Brian.
So I think
Go.
what's so interesting about what you were just talking about too, when we talk about like the sales script and like this, I feel like one of the things with setting expectations, I remember in PT school being told, "Hey, don't foreshadow what is going to
Yeah.
happen. Like this is
Yeah.
what's going to happen. Don't like." I think that's part of it, right? You're drilled in don't do that. But the reality is, to your point, like I would set an expectation all the time. Like if I'm going to Macy's, I use the Macy's analogy all the time, right? Like if a sales rep is good and they're like, all right, talk to me about what are you here for, right? Because the reality is, if I don't have that conversation with somebody and they're like, "Oh, here are all these ties," I'm like, "I'm here for a jacket, dude." And like, you know what I mean? Like, have the conversation first. Like, I'm here for a jacket. All right, what kind of color do you like? I'm looking. You know what I really like was like a cool black leather jacket. All right, cool. Let's go check out our black leather jackets. What size do you want? Slim fit? You want a baggy? You know what I mean? Like going through that process, and then the natural thing of setting expectation is like, "Hey, let's go check it out in the mirror," right? I put it on. It's like, "Ooh, I look cool. Like I like this." Like, you know what I mean? Like now you can set expectation. Like when I go outside, I'm going to look at this. I totally agree with what you just said, and I think it's such an innate thing that's actually like discouraged in PT school. At least that was my experience. And then when I got out there and I realized, to your point about selling plan of care, I didn't even think about selling plan of care. I was like, what's going to happen is you should get better in about 10 visits, potentially 12. Here's how it's going to work. We're going to fix this. We're going to fix this. Then we're going to fix this, and we're going to do this in this amount of time. Blah 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 blah, and then go through the process. And like, if I did that, I almost always sold plan of cares, right? To your point. And it's like, I completely agree. And I think it's something that totally flipped on its head my mindset when I first started learning that and doing that. And I was like, oh, damn, that's something to teach people. I think that's such a great question to ask interviews. How do you sell plan of cares? I never thought to ask that. I think it's a really good way to do that.
Well, I wanted to go back to Owen. So Owen, I was thinking back on the interview process again with what you said. So here's my goal on the questions, because I think we do have to ask more of those questions, but like you're saying, don't try to make it therapy. So what I like, and I don't remember if it was before we hit record or not, I like questions that have many right answers and very specific wrong answers, right? How do you sell a plan of care, right? Oh, hold on. How do you manage drop-offs? I wait to get the list from my front desk. And I'm like, thanks for coming. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
right.
Don't call us, we'll call you, right? So there are wrong answers to that, right? So, but they could have said 3 or 4 other things. And by the way, right, selling a plan of care, right? Someone could explain to me take 20 minutes and I'd be like, wow, what a breakdown. That sounds awesome, right? And so is it right? It was pretty good, you know what I mean? But it wasn't wrong, right? And so here's the two. So of course I have 2 questions I ask all my front desk people. And I don't care what the setting is, by the way, right? How much would you pay for physical therapy?
Right.
And I tell them, just tell me what you would pay. I don't know what physical therapy is. Well, have you ever had a massage? Have you had this? Yeah. So how much would you be willing to pay out of pocket for that? And then the follow-up's the gold mine. I say, so if you would pay $75 for physical therapy, how much is too much for someone to pay for physical therapy here at ABC Physio? And I just wait for that. And I've gotten answers. You would think everybody go, well, it depends, but I've gotten hard answers.
Sure.
Right? Well, right. Because I've gotten, well, whatever my insurance would pay. And well, how much should someone pay here? Whatever their insurance would pay. And I'm like, cool, don't call us. We'll call you, right? Right. Those are the questions I want, Owen, during the during the interview.
That's good.
And it's
like
really
it,
good.
yeah.
And for those people listening that don't understand why Jerry would ask that question, I'll tell you a quick story to validate what Jerry just said.
No,
I remember we were more of an out of network practice that was moving when we first were becoming Evolution. We're transitioning. So we were kind of like cash based. So like I said, started that, and then began to become in network. And I'll never forget having a front desk person. And I was like, just tell them that like that we're out of network their benefits. It's going to cost this. And she goes, well, people want to use their insurance benefits. And I was like, whoa, you are projecting your feelings onto that person. You're making the decision for them. They don't even get to make a decision. The whole point, to your point about what you just said earlier in the podcast, where, hey, I'll show you where to go. You're just allowing that person to make the decision. I go, in that case, you just cut them off from making the decision and made a decision for them. And quite frankly, negatively impacted the business. I ended up firing that employee, by the way, like not short after that. And to your point, that interview question would tease out that employee so that you would make that mistake of hiring that person. So I want to tell that story because like it just resonated with me so much. It's to your point. It's like if you want someone to sell Planet Cares as a front desk person, and that's what they really are, is that front end person, you have to have a person who's willing to be like, oh, like you're going to get rock star treatment here. This is what you would pay. Like you would normally pay this. I would pay for any of this, right? Like you need that person to have that confidence. 90% of sales is confidence in the product. And if they're not willing to pay for the product themselves, guess who's going to lack the confidence to sell it?
Dude, I hear that every day. I still do. I did 5 secret callers yesterday. Yeah, and this is for a whole nother episode. But man, doing secret callers, and I do them to all types of clinics, right? In
Prepare to be horrified.
I'm like telling people, someone said, "Is this true?" And I said, "The top of the post said this happened today." I'm like, I don't make this shit up. I actually, so I have a software that'll do a transcription, and I never tell anybody, and I would never allude to anything, because here's my deal. If I call somewhere and the front end goes real bad, that goes straight upstairs. I'm like, they weren't trained. They were told to do this. I'm like, this isn't on them, right? So back, right, Brian, and you have to own, we didn't interview this person properly, right?
Yeah,
I put the wrong
100%.
person in the seat. I had to do that many times on the front end. So when I do secret callers, I never tie it to anywhere or anything. But dude, you must be prepared. And then to hang up and go, this is cool. I started calling my the competitors of my clients just so they can see what's going on around. One of my clients is really cool. He's had a couple people literally verbalize over the last couple of weeks. We came in because of the way we were talked to at the front desk. And then I'm like, so someone verbalized that. So let's think about how many times people don't or do based on that, right?
Yeah, and I hate to do this to everybody, but I think all of us have hard outs, and I think that honestly, even just that nugget of advice, what interview questions to ask in your front office, already somebody listening to this is going to avoid that terrible like kind of turnover outcome.
Save a lot of money.
Yeah, that's it. It just, listen to a free podcast. And if you want everything tailored to you, Physio Growth is where PTs turn their passion into profit. You get expert mentorship to expand your practice and achieve financial freedom. Start today at school.com/physiogrowth-mentorship-group. And Jerry, honestly, I know you, obviously you're in the same space too. So, plug your stuff, man. I know you said you have a PPS talk coming up with private
practice,
practice, right?
coming up with PPS. If anybody's listening to this prior to October of 2024,
oh yeah, it'll be out.
Up. And I'm on a it's kind of fun. We're talked about the front desk a little bit, but I'm on a tear to create a $100,000 front desk salesperson, and I'm going to roll out that structure at PPS, right? And so, again, for context of people listening, it's always funny because when I say it in the room, it's going to be real fun to watch half of the room pee their pants and the other half of the room smile, because half of the room will be admin people and the other half will be owners. And this idea of, if we created a $100,000 front desk person sales role, that means they created a boatload of money downstream for the business.
For sure.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah, if their salary is only 30-40% of what they're bringing in, that's a great front office person. So awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come with us. We all learned a lot today. Hopefully our listeners did too. And everybody have a great Thursday.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. This is great, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Awesome.